Hello. How are you guys? So, I just finished some lawn work, and my thought was, you just finished some lawn work. You should do a video. Oh, you can see my light. I'm old. Sometimes I need extra light to read. So let me move that. I don't know why that's bothering me. Okay, and have you noticed I made Chex Mix for the neighbors? So less cereal behind me. But you don't care about the cereal. You don't care about my lawn work. I do know what you care about: U.S. foreign policy after the Cold War ends. And goodness, foreign policy was pretty simple um, for a long time. I mean, first of all, there really is none because we don't really have a military. And then maybe it's make sure the British don't take any stuff back and the French don't take any stuff or start a new kingdom or and then maybe it's well we should have a navy after the Civil War and then we have an ocean on either side so we're relatively safe. But then there's World War One and then we go like, yeah, let's disengage. So we do. And then there's World War Two and, once there are airplanes and things, it doesn't matter that much that you have an ocean on either side, although it's a good thing. But after World War Two, I mean, during World War Two, foreign policy was pretty simple too, because Nazis were bad. And as I recall, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. So some easy decisions to make. But after World War Two, we have the mortal enemy, the evil, godless communists of the Soviet Union. So we mostly just want to stop the spread of communism, which does make foreign policy pretty easy. But once there's no more Soviet Union, there's no more evil, godless communist, there's no more evil empire, as Reagan would have said. What will we focus our attention and our really massive arsenal on? Now, we don't really want to focus our massive arsenal on anyone or anything. We are mostly peaceful, maybe. I don't know. Again, up to you. But we don't normally, well, gosh, I was going to say we don't normally start stuff. We don't start world wars, we start other kinds of stuff. But with the focus during the Cold War of being anti communism and then the Soviet Union's collapse, we don't really need to focus on stopping the spread of communism because economics kind of did that. So, what are we going to stop the spread of in the modern era? I know what you're thinking. You're thinking COVID-19, and hopefully we'll work that out. And I was watching the news, and we did a big trial with some medication with several different countries, which is it's a really good sign. That's the kind of globalism I like to see. But we're not really too focused on working with other folks right after the collapse of the Soviet Union because we're the big dog. I mean, we are the global superpower at that point. And while maybe, I know there's more people in China, there's more people in India, and their economies were starting to build during that time period. During the era in the book you're reading about, they're really not a global concern just yet. Okay, but it's coming, coming. All right, so let's talk about what we do with foreign policy during this time period. This is question number 3. How did the collapse of the USSR lead to changes in US foreign policy? Yes, I'm reading the question from my notes. There's my notes. Okay. All right. So we'll start with 1991, which is the collapse of the Soviet Union. And this is probably because they tried to keep up with building a nuclear arsenal when they were broke. I mean, they could not really afford food for everybody. It's kind of a small scale version of North Korea. So, where they spend so much on the military, they really don't have enough money to spend to keep up with other stuff. So, and internal instability was causing problems, so they break up. You end up with Gorbachev going away, Boris Yeltsin becoming the leader of Russia, and then you have several different republics within the um, former Soviet Empire, and they'll have a loose coalition. And to be honest, we don't care too much about them, except we are a little concerned about where all the nuclear weapons went. Because, yeah, a whole bunch of rogue nations with a couple of nukes could be problematic. Now, Bush refers to this as the New World Order, which makes people who are concerned about the globalism pretty nervous. And I think it might, I don't know if it's a music group or maybe it was a bunch of wrestlers. I don't know what it was. But New World Order is probably not the right thing to call it. But that's Bush, it was kind of gaffy that way. He made those kinds of gaffes from time to time. Super nice guy, but said some goofy things from time to time. Now, you know, because you've already done these, the questions about Bush and the question about Clinton and foreign policy. So you have a pretty good idea of the stuff that we did during that time period. So 1991, you've got the Gulf War, which is Desert Storm, Desert Shield, collectively referred to as the Gulf War from time to time. 93, you've got the Oslo Accords, you've got wrapping up of our activities in Somalia, Mogadishu. That didn't go so well. You've got the Oslo Accords, where we're convincing Israel that they need to accept the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, as a spokesgroup for Palestinians and negotiate with them, and they were okay with that in parceling out who gets to do what in the Gaza Strip and other occupied territories in Israel. You have NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. So what you're seeing really is globalism. So we are promoting an international economy like we have a choice, but we are joining in on the idea of this and understanding that we are, at least at that time period, and still in some ways, the largest player internationally economically. But our foreign policy is going to need to dovetail in some ways with our economic policy. And you'll notice that too when you have those presidents who say that they want to be more moral about their foreign policy. I'm talking a little bit about Carter, but also a little about Clinton. The idea of being more pragmatic with your foreign policy. If you owe a country some money, like China, it doesn't give you as much flexibility in demanding that they give people equal rights, civil rights, or even the right to protest their government. So it does create a problem. And you've seen very clearly in the modern era that if you give into a country because you're you either are indebted to them or you let them control parts of your supply chain, it could come back to cause you problems later. So we still haven't completely figured out how to mesh our foreign policy with our economic policy. But the one thing that you do notice, and this is true historically, it's true in your life as well, that if you owe money to someone, if they have economic power over you, or economic control over you, then it's really hard to be very assertive with them. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. So back to the timeline. So 91, collapse of the Soviet Union, 91, Gulf War, 93, Oslo Accords, and NAFTA, which is going to create a free trade zone with the United States and our neighbors to the north, Canada, and our friends to the south, Mexico, and probably beneficial to all of us. I would think so. There are certainly problems with it. I don't know if there was the giant sucking sound that Ross Perot predicted. Issues in Haiti in 94 and 95, kind of consistent issue in the Western Hemisphere. Haiti typically has a government that's controlled by somebody who isn't operating the best interest of their people. During this time period, there was, let's see, Jean Bertrand Aristide, who was the first democratically elected president in Haiti, and he was overthrown. And then we will send troops in to reinstate Aristide, but we end up paying the guy who overthrew him $1 million to leave. So we took in troops as well, but we also paid the guy $1 million to leave. And it was effective, I suppose. Our foreign policy is a little strange, isn't it? Kosovo, there are problems in Kosovo that you've gone over, you've looked at again in this era, and we send troops a lot of places during the Clinton administration. So you're vaguely familiar with all of that. And then 2001, that's when we have 9/11, and that's going to be a different focus for our foreign policy. George Bush will declare, this is the younger George Bush, who's president at that point, declare an axis of evil, which is Iran, no, Iraq, South Korea. Oh gosh, I just said South Korea. I am so sorry. Um, North Korea, Iraq, and Iran, I think. Oh my goodness, how do I not remember the axis of evil? Goodness, because it's late in the day and I just finished the yard work. I'm so sorry. But you don't need to talk about Bush in this question. You really just need to go up through the time period in the chapter. So 2001. You can stop with 9/11 if you like. Okay. Now, a lot of times presidents have doctrines. You notice the Eisenhower doctrine about using force in the Middle East. I guess if you're looking for a doctrine here, which you probably are, because it's like, I got to talk about something, you can talk about the event and talk about how our focus on foreign policy no longer is to prevent the spread of communism, but it is to protect U.S. interests throughout the world. And how do we know what those are? Because sometimes those are economic, sometimes they're political, they're almost always tied together. In theory, it's about human rights because you did see us intervene in a couple of places, especially in Eastern Europe, and when we thought that we could protect people's lives. You also saw us ignoring human rights violations in different countries in Africa and in China as well. So we have an inconsistent foreign policy, which is probably always true anyway, except when we were super isolationists, that was pretty consistent. But back to doctrines. We have the idea of the Clinton Doctrine. Clinton Doctrine. Now, Clinton Doctrine, not really mentioned in your textbook, but just the idea that the U.S. main goal is to protect its interest overseas. And the best way that we can protect our interest overseas is to make sure that everyone's country and economy are stable. So the U.S. wants to promote stability, which sometimes means, like you saw before when we were trying to stop the spread of communism, we might prop up some non-communist dictators. During this era, we may prop up some governments or support some governments that are probably not terribly moral, just in the name of stability. Um, so, stability overseas needs to be met so that it doesn't lead to stability over in the United States. Oh my goodness. That sounds so much like the domino theory, doesn't it? And the idea if somebody falls to communism, then it'll take someone else with them, and you've got to stop it before the trend comes over to the United States. So, um, along with this theory is the idea that our military, conventional and otherwise, mostly conventional to be honest, because we really don't want to nuke anybody, our conventional military needs to be strong enough to fight multiple, not fight, excuse me, to restore stability in two different countries or two different settings, two different times simultaneously. So we have to have a flexible military response that's active, fairly large, but in the modern era, as you've noted, we send the military a lot of places. There aren't as many of them, but we have better equipment. This also means that the burden on our military becomes much greater because we're sending them on more tours than in other eras, with the exception of Vietnam, where we did send people back and forth quite a bit. But we send people back and forth to places in great number. So they serve more than one tour, or we send them, they just finish in one country and then we send them to another country to promote stability. Also, you'll notice because our goal here is to promote stability, we don't have a singular purpose. We don't have like a defeat the Nazis or defeat communism sort of thing. Now, I know that changes after 9/11, but during this time period, our foreign policy is pretty amorphous. It doesn't really have a singular goal, a singular format. The Clinton doctrine, which is very informal, really is just promote the self-interest of the United States, which, okay, I know what some of you are saying because you guys are nice kids. You're going like, oh, that's just so wrong. Yeah, I get it. I get it. But countries promote their self-interest. It's what they do. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not an unusual thing, except we're the global superpower. So we can do it with a lot more force than other countries can. So, all right. I know this question's kind of big and weird, but definitely talk about how we've switched focus away from the Soviet Union. Our goal is no longer to stop the spread of communism, because that's not really an issue anymore, but to promote our own self-interest. When you answer this question, you need to talk about 2 or 3 different countries, where we went, when we went, why we went, and if we were successful in our goal. And you may talk, you probably should at the end, talk about if you think that replacing the old "let's defeat the communist" foreign policy with this version of foreign policy was better, was worse, was kind of the same thing, different form. Just tell me what you think. Okay? All right, there you go. I just noticed I did my lawn work in my Day of the the Day of the Dead shirt. I don't know what the deal was with that. All right. Hope you have a nice afternoon, evening. I know you guys are watching this like the an hour before your assignments due. So stop watching this and go write your answer, okay? Send me an email if you have questions and you're not doing this at 11 o'clock before the due date, all right? All right, hang in there. You're almost done. Home stretch, couple more weeks. Good luck on that book review if you're still working on that. It'll be fine. All right, thanks. Bye.